January 30th, 1945. 9:16 p.m. 3 torpedoes slam into a ship packed with 10,000 refugees fleeing the Soviet advance. 70 minutes later, 9,000 souls are dead, 6 times more than the Titanic. This is the greatest maritime disaster in history. More deaths than the Titanic, Lusitania, and Britannic combined, yet almost no one remembers her name. The MV Wilhelm Gustloff, the tragedy the world forgot, until now. The MV Wilhelm Gustloff was a German ocean liner torpedoed and sunk on January 30th, 1945, by Soviet submarine S-13 in the Baltic Sea. She was evacuating German civilians and military personnel from East Prussia as the Red Army advanced during Operation Hannibal, the largest maritime evacuation in history. An estimated 10,000 people were aboard when she departed Gotenhafen, modern-day Gdynia, Poland. Only 1,239 survived. Between 6,000 and 9,000 died, making it the deadliest single-ship disaster ever recorded. The wreck lies approximately 55 meters deep in the Baltic Sea, a war grave that remains largely undisturbed. Wilhelm Gustloff was built in 1937 as a luxury cruise liner for Nazi Germany's Kraft durch Freude, Strength Through Joy program, a propaganda initiative designed to provide affordable vacations for German workers. At 208 meters long and displacing 25,484 tons, she was a floating symbol of Nazi ideology disguised as leisure. During World War II, she was converted into a hospital ship, then a floating barracks for the 2nd Submarine Training Division. By January 1945, with Germany collapsing, she received her final desperate mission: evacuate as many people as possible from the advancing Soviet forces. She wasn't designed for war. She wasn't built to be a lifeboat. But in the frozen hell of 1945, she became the last hope for thousands fleeing westward. If this forgotten tragedy is shocking you, hit that like button and subscribe, because this is the deadliest maritime disaster in history, and almost no one talks about it. January 1945. East Prussia was falling. Soviet armies had encircled the region, cutting off escape routes by land. Refugees, mothers, children, elderly, wounded soldiers, trekked through blizzards, sub-zero temperatures, and Soviet air attacks, desperate to reach the ports of Pillau or Gotenhafen. Rumor spread. Ships were evacuating people to the west. Safety. Survival. Wilhelm Gustloff was anchored in Gotenhafen harbor, preparing for departure. The ship was designed to carry 465 passengers maximum, but no one was counting. Refugees poured aboard. Soldiers from the Kriegsmarine, 373 female naval auxiliaries, submarine trainees, wounded from field hospitals, and thousands of civilians. By the time she departed at 12:30 p.m. on January 30th, estimates suggest over 10,000 people were crammed aboard. Every cabin, every corridor, every deck, standing room only. She was escorted by 2 torpedo boats, but one, the Hansa, broke down almost immediately. Wilhelm Gustloff continued with just one escort, the torpedo boat Lova. Worse, Lova's submarine detection equipment had frozen solid in the Baltic cold. She was blind. 4 captains argued over the route. Should they sail close to shore in shallow water, or farther out in deeper mined waters? Should they keep navigation lights on to avoid collisions with other German ships, or turn them off to avoid Soviet submarines? The decision was made. Lights on. Deep water route. Maximum speed. It was a death sentence. Soviet submarine S-13, commanded by Captain Alexander Marinesco, had been hunting German vessels for days. At approximately 7 p.m., he detected Wilhelm Gustloff steaming west with lights blazing, a perfect target silhouetted against the dark Baltic. Marinesco shadowed the ship for 2 hours, positioning himself on the port side, the side closest to shore, where the attack would be least expected. At 9 p.m., he surfaced and fired 4 torpedoes. 3 struck home. 21:16. The first torpedo hit the bow, causing watertight doors to lock automatically. Crew members sleeping below deck in forward compartments were trapped instantly, drowned before they could wake. 21:16:10. The second torpedo struck the drained swimming pool area, where 373 female naval auxiliaries were quartered. The explosion dislodged pool tiles at high velocity, turning them into deadly shrapnel. Only 3 women survived. 21:16:15. The third torpedo hit the engine room amidships. Power failed. Communications died. Heat stopped. The ship went dark. Panic erupted. Thousands scrambled for exits. Corridors became death traps as passengers slipped on icy decks, trampled each other on stairs, and fought for lifeboats. But most lifeboats were frozen solid in their davits. Crew members hacked at ice with axes, but there wasn't time. Only 9 lifeboats were successfully launched. 20 minutes after impact, Wilhelm Gustloff listed so severely to port that lifeboats lowered on the starboard side crashed into the tilting hull, spilling passengers into the sea. The water temperature was 4 degrees, 39 degrees. Air temperature was between 10 and 18 degrees C, 14 to 0 degrees C. Ice floes covered the surface. Hypothermia killed in minutes. Passengers jumped overboard by the hundreds, children blown off decks by explosions, adults slipping on ice, families clinging to wreckage. Most died within 5 minutes in the water. 70 minutes after the first torpedo struck, Wilhelm Gustloff rolled onto her side and sank. As she went under, her boilers exploded, briefly restarting the generators. The dying ship lit up eerily one final time before disappearing beneath the ice. 9 rescue ships arrived throughout the night, pulling oil-covered frozen survivors from the water. By dawn, 1,139 people had been saved. The rest, between 6,000 and 9,000 souls, were gone. It remains the deadliest maritime disaster in history. For decades, Wilhelm Gustloff remained a forgotten grave. Germany didn't want to remember a tragedy tied to the Nazi regime. The Soviets considered it a legitimate military target. Survivors rarely spoke. The world moved on. But 150 feet below the Baltic Sea, the ship remains, a silent monument to 9,000 lives erased in 70 minutes. As we descend past 20 meters, the pale green Baltic light begins to fade. The water here is murky, thick with sediment, algae, and the ghosts of war. Only sonar pulses and ROV lights pierce the cold void. At 55 meters down, about 150 feet, the temperature drops to near freezing. Visibility is less than 3 meters. The Baltic is shallow but deadly. And somewhere below, the sonar detects a massive contact. Length, 208 meters. Beam, 23 meters. Target acquired. And then, a shape emerges from the gloom. The hull of the Wilhelm Gustloff rises from the seafloor, listing heavily to port, fractured unmistakably hers. She sits upright but tilted at nearly 45 degrees. Her superstructure is collapsed, crushed by decades of corrosion and the weight of fishing nets draped across her like burial shrouds. Marine growth covers every surface. Rust has consumed her paint, but her shape remains recognizable. This is her. This is the grave. The wreck is a protected war grave under international law. Full penetration is forbidden out of respect for the dead, but even from outside, the devastation is visible. The torpedo impact points are gaping wounds in the hull. The bow, where the first torpedo struck, shows massive structural damage. Watertight doors are frozen open, revealing flooded compartments where crew members drowned in their sleep. The swimming pool area, where 373 women died, is a collapsed cavern. Shattered tiles still litter the debris field. This was ground zero for the second torpedo. Only 3 women escaped. The engine room is a blackened void. The third torpedo destroyed the heart of the ship. Turbines that once powered her at 15 knots are twisted masses of corroded metal. Pipes, valves, and machinery are fused together by rust and sediment. On the decks, personal effects are scattered. Shoes, suitcases, toys, gas masks. Each one belonged to someone. A mother, a child, a soldier, a grandmother fleeing with her grandchildren. Each item represents a life extinguished in 70 minutes. Lifeboat davits hang empty, frozen in their last position. Some still hold cables snapped during the frantic launch attempts. They're monuments to panic and futility. But one item stands out, a child's doll resting on the deck near the forward promenade, untouched for 80 years. A silent witness to the moment everything changed. This doll belonged to a refugee child, maybe 4, maybe 7 years old. She boarded Wilhelm Gustloff with her family, clutching this toy, believing she was escaping to safety. She never reached the other side. The doll rests here now, 55 meters down, in a grave holding 9,000 souls. It's a reminder that this wasn't just a military target. These were families, children, human beings. In this cold, murky darkness, just miles from the Polish coast, in waters where ships still pass daily, the Wilhelm Gustloff tells her story without a single word. Steel corrodes. Nations forget. History moves on. But the sea never forgets. 9,000 souls rest here. Mothers, children, grandparents, soldiers, refugees. They survived Soviet advances. They survived freezing treks across Poland. They made it to the ship. They thought they were safe. And they died in 70 minutes. Torpedoed, drowned, frozen in the Baltic night. The Titanic killed 1,500. The Lusitania won 200. The Wilhelm Gustloff killed 9 times that, yet her name is forgotten. Why? Because she flew a swastika flag? Because her passengers were German? Because acknowledging their suffering complicates the narrative of World War II? History is written by the victors, but the ocean doesn't care about politics. 9,000 people died. They deserve to be remembered. If this forgotten tragedy moved you, share it. Hit that like button, subscribe for more untold maritime disasters, and turn on notifications. Because these 9,000 souls deserve to be remembered, no matter which flag they sailed under. What other forgotten wartime tragedies should we explore? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's make sure the Wilhelm Gustloff is never forgotten again.